Hello and welcome to True Crime Rocket Science, the most authentic voice in true crime. Well, the Chris Watts case continues to unravel seemingly in every kind of direction. If it's not this, it's that. And so the latest thing is a Anadarko CoWorker, someone who actually lives in Steeple Rock Drive, just down the road from Chris Watts, has sort of come forward and sort of told his sort of story, given his sort of version of events. And although some of it rings true and some of it is certainly interesting, and the top comments in the video gush about this co-worker's version of events being exactly like they probably happened, I kind of beg to differ a little bit. Just because, for example, the anonymous co-worker talks about Chris Watts sort of showing up at the Platteville office, and there's absolutely no sign of that in the GPS footage. And not only that, there's no other co-worker who says that. So if it's true that he did show up at the office, there's only one witness saying that he did, and where everybody else don't say that he did. And I don't really know what time he could have showed up at the office, if he was at the well site and then he sort of came back from the well site straight home. So it kind of calls that into question. What is quite interesting, and it's unfortunate that the channel didn't sort of question the anonymous worker a little bit more about it, was the office politics at Anadarko. On the one hand, you can kind of understand that he's not free to be too candid about that sort of thing, because as far as I know, he still works at Anadarko. We're not quite sure what his identity is. His wife's name's Ashley. We don't know too much beyond that. He does certainly make some interesting observations. He says that while Shanann was away, that they noticed, him and his wife noticed, that Watts was never home. So for most of July, he was just sort of AWOL. You know, he would come home from work and then he wouldn't be home. The other thing is, he thought that he saw Chris Watts. I think he said that him and his wife thought they saw a woman in a vehicle with Chris Watts, but a woman that wasn't his wife. Now, I'm not quite sure what vehicle that was. I presume it might be the Lexus or Kessinger's car, but probably the Lexus. And then I think he said something about Watts accelerated when this guy tried to sort of catch up with him. So, you know, that certainly gives you kind of a sense of the reality of the situation, right? The other thing that doesn't quite kind of make sense is that he says Kessinger didn't show up to work at all on the 13th. Now, either this means that there's some kind of conspiracy going on, in terms of at the office a lot of people are covering for her or something like that, or he simply didn't see her. She was there, but he simply didn't see her. She was in her office, but he simply didn't see her. I don't know if it's... And so I do know that when he mentioned this, someone on the channel sort of went like, oh wow, that's amazing. One person saying they didn't see something doesn't mean that that's a fact. It just means that was their experience. They may have just missed Kessinger, right? So I don't know. This anonymous co-worker sort of gives quite a glowing endorsement of Chris Watts. He sort of says, I realized that he did what he did, although he seems to put the blame on Kessinger, that Kessinger actually did something, that she was actually there. But what also does sort of pass that sort of smell test is where he says that he thinks that when Chris Watts lost weight, it kind of went to his head. When he got attention from Kessinger, it also went to his head. He also mentions, I don't know whether this is true, but this is his opinion or his observation, was that he said that Kessinger flirted with a lot of people at work or something to that effect, and used other kind of unsavory words to describe her. And according to him, a lot of the guys didn't really respond, but Chris Watts did. Now, I have actually in the past raised this whole issue of the fact that the oil industry is a male-dominated workplace, and Kessinger was sort of in this situation as a kind of a single woman surrounded by these sort of young bucks. And so surely there had to have been some sort of sexual tension, sexual awareness, sexual awakening, whatever. And in this situation, Chris Watts was kind of a sitting duck. I mean, here is this woman who seemed to have quite a big appetite in that sense, and Chris Watts had very little experience with the opposite sex, and he's not happy in his marriage. Maybe his wife was happy, but he wasn't very happy in his marriage. And then he meets this woman, and she's kind of pursuing, it seems, not, I wouldn't say anyone, but she's in general looking for love, I guess, looking for someone. We know she was also on the eHarmony app, and what's happened to be in that situation. And he may have kind of mistook her friendliness for flirtation. Maybe it was flirtation, but it could also just have been the way Kessinger was, just kind of being quite friendly. And where other guys maybe kind of gave her the cold shoulder, he responded. He was, it might have started in a not necessarily a personal way. It wasn't that she was personally interested in him, but he found himself kind of activated, kind of triggered, kind of, wow, this woman is actually paying attention to me, and he enjoyed that feeling. And then she enjoyed his responsiveness. He was probably a lot more responsive than a lot of the men there, but also not in a cliched way, in kind of a gentle and kind way, which is so incongruous with what he ultimately ended up doing. So I'll put a link to the video in the description. It's sort of quite a long, sort of rambling interview, but there are sort of moments where you get a sense of reality from what he's saying. Of course, there are also moments where I don't know whether you do. For example, as far as I'm concerned, things like angels and demons, gods and devils don't belong in true crime. People are susceptible to that kind of thing, and they seem to like the idea that a person becomes a devil or becomes a demon, or that a demon takes control of them, and so the demon should go on trial and should be sentenced to life in prison. Is that really what you want? Because if you're going to do that, if you're going to kind of give the blame to that kind of thing, then it's got nothing to do with the person. Then you're going to put the god or the devil on trial and sentence the spirit to time in jail. And if you think it's absurd, it is absurd. It's absurd that demons and disorders get the blame for crimes and not people. It's actually a fact that people commit these crimes and people stand trial and people go to jail. But the public seem to just love this idea that no, it was a devil that was involved and red eyes and whatnot. And it's not. It is people who pull the trigger. It is people who dig holes and bury bodies. It's people who have got motives, people who've got desires. And all that other stuff, that wishy-washy kind of, demons and dragons stuff, is kind of fluff that gets in the way. The one dragon that I think is very important and very appropriate to true crime is the dragon of emotion. And in the old stories about, the knight slaying the dragon, what that actually means is you are overcoming the monster within, your emotions. You're slaying your emotions. You're becoming the master of yourself. What is quite interesting when I lived in the East was that the dragon isn't a symbol to be feared necessarily. It's not necessarily like an opponent as it is in the West. It's just a symbol of power. So in other words, a dragon is simply power. And you can either have that dragon on your side, you can have it kind of under your spell or under your control, or you can have it control you. And in this case, with Chris Watts, the dragon controlled him, and burned everything up to a crisp until nothing was left. But it's still the responsibility of a person. It is still a person that commits these crimes, that has a motive, it's how the identity plays through the circumstances. Does that make sense? I actually meant to talk about in this episode Chris Watts' sadistic psychology, but instead this CoWorker sort of, said his thing, and it's obviously getting a lot of attention. So I will hold that over to the next episode, just talking about anality and sadism and the relationship between these two. It's something I studied when I wrote a book about mass shooters, so it is actually quite a fascinating concept. If you haven't subscribed yet to True Crime Rocket Science, please do. Like, share, leave a comment, and I'll see you guys next time.